sure where to put the target inside of this oversized sight window.
Welcome back to TacNTrack. Today we're going to be talking about the famous or infamous Intratec Tec-9. This particular one is a dc-9. We'll talk a little bit about some of its history, how the DC designation came into effect, and we're going to rate this just like we would any other gun. With that being said, it is a little bit different than what we see in other guns. These came out in the mid-80s, 1984 I believe to be exact. They were originally attempted to be marketed as a military or police firearm. South Africa, I believe, was the intended home for these originally. They're simple tube style guns. We see tube guns in some other stuff, most famously the Sten. But it's a very simple, very basic design. These also have a connected history with crime that we really can't ignore and talk about in Intratec without talking about lawsuits and crime. So these were originally intended as a military or police firearm, as a simple, cheap subgun. They were originally designed in the first iteration of the Tec-9 as an open bolt gun, which meant that instead of firing from here where we have the bolt closed, they would fire from here with the bolt open. When you pull the trigger, they'd slam forward, like what we see with an Uzi or a Thompson or a Sten and the guns that were designed to be fully automatic. The original Tec-9s were deemed too easy to be converted to fully automatic. Open bolt guns themselves are not necessarily guns that get banned, and they're not necessarily illegal in that sense. But the Tec-9 was deemed too easy to be converted. So what we get following that up is the dc-9. Which was, I believe, designated California was what that abbreviation for the DC was for, and they switched the gun to a closed bolt gun, which is what we actually see here. I'm sure the video is labeled Tec-9, but a dc-9 is actually the appropriate firearm in question here. The Tec-9s are available in fully automatic for those who want to throw down the money. I would personally not recommend spending, $15,000 on this firearm, and we'll talk about the normal 5 things that we talk about with all the firearms with this guy. Value, ease of use, fun factor, reliability, and accuracy. These just generically don't do well in any of those categories. But we'll start off talking about value. When these things came out, and I have the original brochure here that came with this one, it's hilarious. I would just recommend looking at any of Intratec's 1980s advertising. They're great. They originally MSRP'd for about $260. With that being said, there's somewhat of a collector's market out there for these, and the prices of these guys have skyrocketed. Today, I think you'd have trouble finding one under $800. They're going to run you somewhere between $1,800 and $1,500, depending on where you can find one and just the overall condition, because a lot of them have really suffered throughout time with rust issues because the coating on them wasn't particularly great. As a matter of fact, we'll see this one's recoated. Here, this is a Cerakote coating that's been done to this one simply due to a little bit of surface rust that was developing on this one. I think I've got a picture. If I do, I'll pop it up for you guys so you can see it. It wasn't horrible, but certainly at the point to where this one needed to be recoated. With all of that being said, a value score in today's market, if you were buying one of these as a firearm, really quite poor. We're going to give it a 1.6 out of 5. And the only reason we're actually going to even go that high is because there is somewhat of a collector's market for these. I think they're at their absolute peak right now. I can't imagine them going any higher than they are right now. And I personally couldn't imagine paying market price for one of these in today's market. I just don't see it. I know they've appeared in a lot of film, videos, video games, and they're kind of 80s pop culture icon, but to be quite honest, they're flat out terrible. But we're going to give it a value score of 1.6 out of a possible 5. We always rate guns on an ease of use scale. The Tec-9 is actually quite easy to use. It's real simple magazine release down here on the bottom of the gun. The one thing that is a little bit weird is as we flip it over, we can see the safety is actually a push-pull release on the charging handle here. One thing I will say that makes this gun difficult to use is the sights. And this safety is just weird. It's not horrible, but it is most definitely weird. It takes some getting used to in order to use. So we're going to give it an ease of use score of 3.8 out of 5. So we always talk about fun factor. The Tec-9 is actually pretty fun to have. It's not a particularly good gun, but it is fun. I mean, it is a high capacity 9mm subgun that is enjoyable to shoot, and it makes you feel like a superhero anytime you can actually hit the broadside of a barn with it. So it is fun to shoot, and it is enjoyable to have, and this is one of those firearms that everybody likes to shoot. Nobody wants to tell their friends they actually shot one, but pretty much everybody enjoys shooting this thing. And it's not because the gun is a good shooter, it's just because it's such a cultural icon, and it's one of those things you rarely see outside of a safe today. So we're going to give it a fun factor of 3.2 out of a possible 5 stars. It would be a lot more fun if it was actually good. Let's talk a little bit about the reliability of a Tec-9. That's not one of those things that's generally talked about with these things. As a tube gun, they're surprisingly unreliable for what they are. With that being said, overall, I've had very few malfunctions with this. Most of the function problems relate to magazines, and magazines are nearly impossible to get for these. This one in particular feeds pretty well, but every once in a while you will have a feed-related issue. That's really the only problems that I've had out of this. That and sometimes the safety's a little bit hard to get fully disengaged. It's not that the safety doesn't work, it's just a pretty bad design for a safety. I don't think much was thought about besides getting these out cheaply when they were designed. With that being said, they're not as horrible as one would think in the reliability factor. We're going to give it a reliability number of a 3.1, and most of the reliability issues have to do with feeding from the magazine. One of the topics you almost never hear anybody talk about with the Tec-9 is accuracy. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. Remember, we're comparing this to handguns, not to rifles. With that being said, we're going to give it an accuracy score. One thing I do want to point out is this is a fairly long barrel. This is a fairly heavy gun. You would actually expect this gun to be quite accurate. And it's not for what it is. The sights are almost criminal. They're so bad. It was clearly not intended to really have the sights used. I mean, it is folded pieces of sheet metal that are poorly notched. It's really hard to get a good sight picture with this thing. And really, this gun should be fairly accurate given its size, weight, the 9mm low recoiling round, and it's got a pretty good sight radius. I mean, if we look from front to back on this firearm, the sight radius is pretty good. That should help you use this gun accurately, but the trigger is absolute trash. The sights are completely trash. With that being said, we're going to give it an accuracy score of 3.2 out of a possible 5. And I really think that that's sad for what this gun is. It should do significantly better than this, but it just falls short. So to recap, if you're thinking about buying a Tec-9 and you're wondering, is this the gun for me? I think the answer is categorically going to be across the board, absolutely not. If you're looking at it as an investment piece, I think the market's at its absolute peak. I don't think these guns will go up in value at all. I think pretty much all the collectors who are interested in buying a Tec-9 for its historical value have already bought one. I think the market's capped out there. As a handgun, it's pretty terrible. At its new MSRP of $260, if you could buy one for that today, maybe, but you can't. I mean, they've gotten really quite expensive. The triggers are terrible, the sights are terrible, the safety's questionable. It's extremely large, it's very heavy, and its larger capacity magazines that we found to be so attractive in the mid-1980s are commonplace today. It's got a very sordid history that would make me not necessarily want to own one or to buy one or to have one. I really don't have a whole lot of good things to say about it. I can't recommend to anybody out there buying a Tec-9 for really any reason whatsoever. But we've got one, so enjoy watching us shoot it.
Stupid gun.